Hello everyone, I've got Ian Brighthope here and we're going to be speaking about all things health and particularly about the big changes that happened in this state of Victoria in Australia and around the world actually when the COVID-19 came along. So I'll just go over to Ian and just ask him at least to introduce himself. So Ian, tell me a little bit about your background.
Well, thanks George. Yes, my background goes back to, I guess, my grandfather, grandmother and parents. And it's all to do with good food and nutrition. So I was brought up in a family where we had vegetables and salads and garlic and a whole range of things people didn't even know about in the early days. And my grandfather was a chef from Europe, so he knew what he was doing with regard to fresh, unprocessed foods. Then when I decided to do something in life, I decided I would do agricultural science. So I studied agricultural science and graduated in it, and I enjoyed it thoroughly because it taught me all about the soils and the pastures and the crops and the animals and how our food is manufactured and processed and delivered to us in the cities. And then after that I was interested in research, so I went into research, animal nutrition and other areas as well, started teaching, and I met some doctors and nurses, and I was convinced then that I could do more with regard to not just foods and looking after animals, but looking after human beings. And so I decided to do medicine. I graduated in medicine in 1974, and that was interesting because the first 3 years were very high level science. I understood it and I loved it very much. But the clinical years were extremely disappointing. Yes, with regard to anaesthetics and surgery and trauma, they were great clinical studies that I was doing and involved in and patients and so forth. But when it came to chronic medical conditions, were absolute failure. And I was really, really disappointed with my training because there was no nutrition in the 6-year medical course apart from 4 hours of lectures and on nothing much than 4 hours of lectures about proteins, fats and carbohydrates. They left out all of the important things like vitamins and minerals and trace elements. And so I'd learnt about those things in ag science and how we look after animals by supplementing their diets with nutrients, salt licks, and putting selenium, for example, into the soil. Deficient soils contain less nutrients than they should. So I decided that at the end of my medical course I was going to do something different. And during the medical course I was seeing a patient with a group of other students, and the professor was there as well. And the prof actually was talking about the cancer patient lying in the bed. And I actually knew what the patient was taking for dinner. The patient was on intravenous sugar and salt, and she received ice cream and jelly for her dinner. And that was all she received. And that's full of sugar and rubbish. And I said to the prof, what about the lady's nutritional status? He said, we're not worried about her diet. We're worried about the cancer in the bed and what we're going to treat and how we're going to treat it. And I thought that's not the way I want to be as a doctor. So I just decided I would do something different when I graduated. So I did. I actually did practice medicine for a while, and I did anaesthetics, and I learnt quite a bit from doing the ordinary medicine outside of the hospital and training system. But I travel around the world looking at all the ways of managing illnesses and disease and treating patients, picking up a lot of information, a lot of ideas about what one can do. And when I returned to Australia, there was a couple of other doctors who were interested in nutritional medicine. And so we got together and formed an organisation called the College of Nutritional Medicine. We later called it the Australasian College of Nutritional and Environmental Medicine. And as a consequence of that, we started, I introduced a training course, we introduced a fellowship program, examinations, and that college has been going for roughly 45, 46 years now, training doctors in nutritional and environmental medicine, which means they're being trained in nutritional oncology, treating cancer patients, nutritional cardiology, treating heart patients, nutritional immunology, nutritional neurology, nutritional endocrinology, all the ologies that we see in ordinary medicine, we're just tagging on the nutritional aspect of it, and those nutrients and diets then can help all of these patients with degenerative diseases and also acute conditions as well. So acute rheumatoid arthritis or acute viral infections, acute septicemias, they can all be helped in terms of the outcomes of the clinical problems by using nutrients judiciously in patients. So we've learnt a lot, and there's a lot of research being done now in this area, and it's become very highly respected in the community. The medical profession are starting to take on integrative medicine. They're starting to think about it. Some doctors are actually practicing it after they've got their qualifications. Clinics are being set up, and there's been an acceleration of interest, especially since COVID, because COVID was not a real disease. COVID was not managed properly, and the scientists and doctors involved and the regulators involved and the politicians involved all spread the lie that was created by the World Health Organization as a consequence of an attempt to really control healthcare from above, and that's from the World Health Organization and essentially the United Nations. So we are in a situation now where I'm very heavily involved with various organisations. The World of Wellness was established during COVID. I established that with some like-minded, awakened individuals who were very concerned about the way patients were managed, people were managed during COVID. We should not have had the lockdowns. The masking was useless. The putting up of plastic barriers was insanity. The lockdowns were very, very dangerous to children, and we've lost a generation of children have lost their proper training and education and their socialisation and their upbringing. The worst thing that happened was that they refused to use early treatments and prevention using vitamin C, vitamin D and zinc from the beginning of the pandemic. From the beginning of the pandemic, when Scott Morrison announced it was a pandemic, I wrote to Scott Morrison, I wrote to Greg Hunt, the Health Minister, I wrote to the Chief of the Health Department, the Chief Medical Officer. I wrote to the AMA, the Australian Medical Association, the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners. I wrote to heads of unions, heads of business, about how important it was to take the population of Australia into not a pandemic, but an epidemic of a coronavirus, which does not kill, does not harm anybody unless they've got comorbidities or they're over the age of 80. The morbidity of this disease was so low, and the mortality rate was extremely low. It was just a very bad flu. They overreached with their regulations, they overreached with the management, and they failed dismally the Australian population. So I believe that they should be held accountable, and that's what I would like to see eventually. But the World of Wellness, I facetiously established it as the WOW, so that we can refer to the WOW instead of the WHO being the World Health Organization, because we don't want to be told what to do in the future when the WHO claims there's another pandemic. And they will, they're planning another pandemic into the future sometime. Okay. So I'm very keen on growing the WOW and joining the WOW up with other like-minded groups, and we've joined a whole lot of like-minded groups. In fact, there's 38 different organisations in the country have come together and are working under the banner of the Aligned Council of Australia, or the ACA. And the ACA is moving forward with regard to a range of activities to ensure that we have a governance system in this country that's awake to what's been happening, including the alerting of the politicians who are still highly endowed with the manufacturers of drugs and vaccines. We need to move our politicians away from conflicts of interest. We need to educate them better, because they think that the medical system is fine. The medical system and the healthcare system in this country has collapsed. It's been shattered. and it's failing in nearly every respect. But don't get me wrong, we still can do the best surgery and give the best anaesthetics, and if somebody's got a serious illness as a consequence of trauma, then we're the best at doing that and looking after that. We've got some fantastic machines for diagnosis of serious conditions like cancer, but we manage cancer dismally. In fact, the surgery, radiotherapy and chemotherapy that we use for treating cancer patients, it's cut, burn and poison. It basically damages the cancer patient who's already been damaged by the existence of their cancer. So we have to strengthen cancer patients, nourish them, give them the nutrients that they need, and build them up to a level where they can tolerate the cut, burn and poison therapy, and the outcomes are far superior if that's the case. So COVID has been crippling because of the vaccines. And I don't mind saying that the vaccines are not true vaccines, they are gene therapies. The mRNA is a genetic substance that has an influence on the expression of our protein manufacturing factories in our cells. It's also contaminated with DNA. The vaccines were contaminated with too much DNA, which can incorporate itself into our own DNA and change the nature of our blueprint, our DNA, the blueprint of life, which is, to me, the most inhumane thing that's ever happened to humanity. It is a crime against humanity of the most enormous size. Not only that, the lipid nanoparticle which carries the mRNA in the vaccine into our body travels all around the body. It travels to the brain, to the heart, to the liver, to the lungs. It travels to the intestines, it travels to the skin, it travels to the ovaries, and it travels to the testes. When it travels to the ovaries and the testes, it's actually having an influence on future generations and human fertility. So we've seen fertility go down, fertility rates have gone up, infertility rates have gone up enormously, 300%. The miscarriage rate has gone up as well significantly, and the babies that are being born are perhaps not as healthy as they should be. So we need to do something more about the lies that were told about the vaccine and the money that was spent on the vaccines. The economy has suffered considerably during COVID. $870 billion was wasted, nearly $1 trillion was wasted on COVID when it was not necessary. It could have built hospitals, schools, homes. It could have been used for so many other things to benefit our culture, our society. I'm very fearful if our politicians are not awakened up, or if they don't change, and we can't change our politicians, that it could be the end of Australia as we've known it. The problems we've got in health is not just in health and medicine, but it's in psychological well-being as well. And we're seeing a lot more violence, we're seeing a lot more mental illness, we're seeing a lot more turbo cancers that start off at stage 4 and the patient may last for 4 weeks to 4 months after diagnosis, instead of being diagnosed with primary cancer where we can treat it in the early stages. So this is all due to the vaccines, these genetic vaccines that have been injected into the majority of the population. It's a very sad state of affairs, and the international health regulations that the WHO have initiated are upon us, which means we in Australia will have to do whatever the bureaucrats in the World Health Organization tell us to do in terms of health in the future. Lockdowns, masking, medications that we may not want, injections that we may not want, and our government is actually going to be passing laws, and in fact the Western Australian government has passed laws in which the forces, either the police or the army, can hold individuals down and inject them with medications even if the people don't want them. And usually these are experimental injections. We've actually breached the code that was developed from the Second World War after the...
Was this put in our constitution? I think there was a vote about vaccinations.
There's been laws put into place in this country with regard to vaccination that boggle the mind. the Nuremberg trials, they are the trials of the Nazi criminals, was one thing. Out of that came some rules and codes, and one was that people should not be experimented on without their consent. But we were, with COVID, experimented on without consent. Most of us didn't consent. In fact, virtually everybody did not consent. Because
So what was your reaction when COVID was announced? Did you have an immediate reaction, or were you puzzled? How did you respond?
I thought it was absolutely insane for Scott Morrison and any doctor in this country to say we've got a pandemic of a killer disease when it was simply a coronavirus. Because the coronavirus is a well-known virus. We've all had coronaviruses, and coronaviruses cause the common cold. You know, a very severe coronavirus may cause pneumonia in weak people, people with diabetes or heart disease, and in the elderly. But a coronavirus doesn't. So they knew, they must have known that this coronavirus had been manipulated. It had been manipulated, what we call gain of function. So it was a virus that at the time I suspected it had been manufactured in a laboratory, but there was no evidence for it. But the reaction to the politicians around the world and the bureaucrats around the world and the chief health officers, medical officers, they must have been advised by the WHO, the World Health Organization, that this is a dangerous coronavirus. And the World Health Organization would have known, should have known, that it was a gain of function virus, a virus that was changed in its nature so it could be more potent, it could be transmitted more easily, it could be more pathogenic, and it could be more deadly. So that's why they panicked and called it a pandemic. The laboratory in which we know now it evolved from was a laboratory in Wuhan, China, but it wasn't just the Chinese who were working on it. There are these laboratories, they're highly secure laboratories, microbiological laboratories around the world, where this sort of experimentation on viruses is being done. And they use the excuse that if one country develops a weaponized virus, as they call them, the gain of function or weaponized viruses, if one country around the world creates a weaponized virus, then we need to know how to neutralize it. We need to be able to vaccinate against it. Well, this is shonky science at the best. It really is dangerous science. It should be stopped, because the creation of weaponized bacteria and viruses could wipe out the entire human race. They may say, well, we can develop a vaccine against it, like they did with COVID. That was an absolute joke, because that mRNA vaccine is not a true vaccine. It's genetic manipulation, genetic modification of the human being.
It's starting to look to me like it wasn't by accident and by good advice. It's starting to look like it was engineered to actually create the destruction of humanity.
Well, it's been created, and that's been the effect. And the vaccine has killed tens of millions. It hasn't saved many lives, if at all any. The science that's coming out that's saying it has saved lives is manipulated science. It's not saved lives, it's killed people, and it's changed our genome. It's changed the genome, and people are getting genetically based diseases, they're getting autoimmune diseases, they're suffering from neurological and nervous system diseases, brain diseases. People are suffering from diseases they should never have had. People are suffering from diseases that from presentations of diseases that we've never seen before. Presenting with turbo cancers, and the turbo cancer is just not one bowel cancer, but two bowel cancers in the one bowel.
What do you believe brought this about? Because this is a sudden change, is that right? There's been a change since 2020?
A change in what?
Well, you're talking about these diseases that are coming along.
Well, the changes in the turbo cancers, George, for example, is, for example, women have got 3 different cancers in the breast. One breast has 2 different cancers, 2 genetically different cancers, and there's another cancer genetically different to the other 2 in the other breast. The same in the large bowel. These things have been seen. And we're also seeing in these cancer cells, in these cancers, say you've got a lump of cancer, within that cancer is the mRNA and the spike protein from the vaccines. If anybody says it's not caused by, well, there's certainly a very close association. And why is it there? And why are the cancers so aggressive? We know that genetically in the virus, in the spike protein, that there are other factors that cause inflammation and also cause suppression of the genes that suppress cancer. So we end up with cancers taking off and very easily.
Your immune system is getting weaker as a result.
After the first vaccine, the immune system is weakened. After the second vaccine, it's weakened further. After you've had the fourth vaccine, you have what's called negative efficacy, which means when you are exposed to the virus, you're more likely going to get it. So it's got, instead of being positive efficacy, it's a negative efficacy. So your immune system is severely, severely suppressed.
I myself believe that this was what they call a PSYOP. When the announcement was made, I was already thinking, I think this is it. When somebody comes along like you and challenges the status quo, and the mainstream media say things like, only the unvaccinated are dying from COVID, I thought, no, that's a lie. They can lie, and what is the average person meant to do? As far as the masks were concerned, they did nothing, from what I can see. You can correct me if...
No, the masks did nothing. In fact, the masks can actually increase your risk of respiratory infections.
You know, what I do believe was happening was that they were using the masks as an indicator that people were obeying the government, because they had cameras in all those supermarkets and so forth. And you could go to a brothel, but you couldn't go to church. You go to a bottle shop, for example. I was watching all this and I thought, oh no, this is so controlled and so staged. We got a situation where the mainstream media, the medical system, the politicians, our tertiary institutions seem to be all controlled. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just telling you what I've seen. And then somebody like you comes along and challenges all this, highly qualified. I've seen your resume, it's pretty impressive. And you're actually contradicting what the status quo is saying. I'm not surprised that somebody sooner or later would come up and say something, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then you think, well, hang on, who's controlling all of this?
It's coming from the military-industrial complex. Okay. And the military-industrial complex is growing and getting bigger and bigger. The military-industrial complex has now got ownership over the pharmaceutical industry, so it's the military-industrial pharma complex. The military-industrial pharma complex have got control over our systems in terms of defence and in terms of medicine and healthcare, because to defend a country against these bacteria and viruses that are being weaponised, we need to have defence systems at that level, at the biological level. And that's why these mRNA vaccines have come on board, because they think it's such wonderful technology. But it's deadly technology, it's dangerous technology. But the military-industrial pharma complex has been a money-making machine. It's a grand machine for taking money from the public, from taxes, and putting it into the industry, putting it into weaponry for the military. And that's why we have wars here, there and everywhere, so that this complex can thrive. And it is a PSYOP by all means. We are made to fear what the future is, because we're being told that the current, the present and the past has been fearful as well. And so the entire population is fearful. Once they're fearful, they'll do what the authorities say, because a fearful population will look towards a leader, a so-called leader, to take them and make them feel safe. And when they feel safe, they don't want to know anything else. That's why so many of my profession, as soon as they've graduated, in fact before they've graduated, they've lost the ability to not only think clearly, but think critically. And my profession, they can't think. They're very narrow-minded individuals in my profession until they get to retirement, and that's when they start travelling, playing golf, maybe opening their eyes to something. When they get sick, they look to people like me when their own system fails them. And that's when the light bulb hits. Say, oh, all my career I have been doing the wrong thing. I have been doing the wrong thing. Ian was right. His group was right. His college was teaching the right things. We were graduating from universities that were corrupted by Big Pharma, and Big Pharma controlling the training of doctors. Doctors have to graduate thinking in terms of disease and drugs, and that's their approach. Chemical drugs from the pharmaceutical industry, a lot from the oil industry, basically chemicals that have been created to oppress the living system. And it's not much different living today than it was in the concentration camps of Nazi Germany.
That's a big statement.
It is a big statement, but you can extrapolate. What happened during COVID, we were injected, the whole population was injected with an experimental drug. It wasn't shown to be safe, it wasn't shown to be effective. We knew before it was even released that there are over 1,200 serious adverse effects, including death, but we were not told about it. My profession was not told about it, and my stupid profession, the stupid leaders in my profession, did not listen. They did not listen, they were willfully blind, and also, I might say, the leaders in my profession are conflicted, are corrupted. Many of them receive funding directly or indirectly from the pharma industry, and they look forward to working with Big Pharma if they don't want to seek work in clinical practice, or they're going to be working for Big Pharma by conducting their studies in our wonderful tertiary institutions and hospitals. So our system is I have to use a rude word, it's stuffed.
Yeah, that's okay. Stuffed is good.
Stuffed is good.
PCR test, what do you think about that?
Poisonous, toxic. It was not a test for diagnosis, it was never designed as a diagnostic test. The PCR test was designed as a laboratory test to determine if there's any evidence of infectious material in a particular sample. It was never meant to diagnose a disease. And if you do a PCR test and many what we call cycles of the testing amplifies a minute amount of viral material in your system, it will say, okay, that virus is there and you've got that virus. But that's not accurate because it doesn't necessarily mean you've got the virus. And so many people were asymptomatic and diagnosed wrongly from the PCR test. People line up in their cars and in fields and paddocks and in the street. It was absolutely hideous to see people. I mean, they're being referred to as sheeple, and which is highly insulting to humans who are meant to be intelligent. But our intelligence is one thing, but our common sense is another. And
you can call it indoctrinated if you like.
Indoctrinated, brainwashed. For us who were trying to inform with the truth and the facts and the data, and patients who were concerned about their problems and the receipt of the vaccinations, my profession would gaslight them.
Yeah.
Basically gaslight them.
Just tell me about WOW once again, and what you're trying to do with WOW.
The World of Wellness International Limited is a not-for-profit company. It's an organisation of members, and the organisation, its aims and objectives are to educate and inform the public about healthcare and wellness, and also about alternatives to cut, burn and poison therapies in medical care. And it's meant to be an organisation purely as an informative organisation, but with some activity with regard to educating at a political level, at an economical level, and we have a newsletter every week. We have public meetings. We used to have them every week. We have them every fortnight now, and we also have. I write a Substack for my own following, but the Substack is actually put up onto the website, and we have a website that's active and informative. And we've done many, many interviews like this and other sorts of interviews in which we educate and train the public in so many things, from soil science and the microbiome in the soil, to the microbiome in the gut, to the microbiome in the brain. So we very, very active, very small group, volunteers only, and we're always looking for more volunteers, people to do things for us or on our behalf anywhere in the country. And we call ourselves the World of Wellness International, and I'd like to say that we're linked, and I'm linked in particular, with organisations in North America, South America, Europe, UK, even in Southeast Asia as well. So there is a massive number of scientists and doctors and lay people involved in wanting to see change, talking about change. We only get change not by our leaders, because our leaders have to do in the future what we want them to do, what we ask them to do, what they're there for. They are our servants. They are our servants. Anthony Albanese and his crew in Canberra are our servants. And if he stops serving us, then he's got to go. And I believe he does have to go.
I'm agreeing with everything you're saying. From what I can see, correct me if I'm wrong, that our society, through advertising, marketing, media, politicians, education, have been steered down a track that big monopoly corporations can do a better job of creating our food, creating our health. And I would actually ask, if you want to ask the common person a question about something like cancer, I would probably phrase the question like this. I'd say, all right, we know cancer's been around a long time. Now imagine you're the CEO of Pfizer and you can cure cancer. So you've got this one shot or one tablet that will fix cancer. Give me a reason why that CEO of Pfizer would release this product, which would destroy all of his radiotherapy, all of his chemotherapy products. There's billions of dollars being made here. That's suddenly going to be annihilated because you've just cured cancer. So what economic reason, or what, from a CEO, what would give them a reason to give you the cure for cancer? The answer would be, I would imagine, they wouldn't.
They wouldn't. But I mean, there are ways of treating cancer patients early to cure them. But those approaches, and usually they're plant medicines and things like that, are forbidden, verboten. You know, the doctors are not allowed to use them. I mean, we do a lot of things for patients that are not orthodox, they're not part of the establishment. We know if they're used early enough that they can help cancer patients better. And we know that we can prevent cancer, and many of the cancers can be prevented if the right nutrients are in your system and your genes are functioning the right way. You will not have the cancer genes switched on. But the issues are no research, not enough research. And when there is research, I can say that there was research in the 1980s and 1970s on the use of micronutrients in prevention and treatment of cancer. And when it was discovered that you could actually prevent certain, for example, in northwestern China, where they have a lot of gastrointestinal cancer, huge amount of gastrointestinal cancer, very large study conducted by William Blott back in the 1970s, 1980s, he showed that 3 micronutrients could reduce the incidence of cancer in 30,000 people by 26%.
Do we have a nutritional problem? Is that what we're really facing here?
We've got a nutritional problem, we've got deficiency of micronutrients, and the micronutrients are protective.
There seems to be more vaccinations for children than there ever was. They have to take more of them.
That's why they're sick. That's why babies die. SIDS, vaccination reaction. Autism, vaccination reactions. All the allergies, nearly all the allergies, vaccination reactions. You cannot disrupt the immune system with such a powerful thing as an antigen and an adjuvant. You're actually injecting into the system a number of antigens. Often they've never been seen in nature before. They've been bastardized, they've been modified with an adjuvant like aluminium. And as soon as that poison goes into the system, you've disrupted the system. And it's not just the immune system, it's every system in the body, including the brain and the heart. And, you know, every tissue is affected. Why do these kids get asthma, lung? Why do they get hay fever? Why do they get migraine? Why do they get behaviour disorders? Why do they get childhood diabetes? Why do they get things like leukemia? You know, always remember the causes is either an excess or a deficiency. It can be an excess of a poison, a toxin, a drug, an antibiotic, or a whole lot of excesses, stress, or it could be a deficiency. There'd be a deficiency of a nutrient, a vitamin, mineral, essential fatty acid, or a relative deficiency, where you've got somebody who's so fat that they've got relative deficiencies of the essential fatty acids. Those that stop inflammation, those that stop cancer.
A visual indicator, by the way, go on YouTube and have a look at New York 1920. Have a look at the people. Come forward to today and have a look at New York today. You'll see a difference. They've got, I've seen some people who walk around and you look at them and you say they're overweight, but there's some that are obese. Then you've only got to look at their fridge and what they eat. High sugar diets. Who knows if they're taking every vaccination? They have this belief that well, I'll give you a good example. Polio. Because the people who are pro-vaccine will always go to polio and say they solve polio through vaccination. Your thoughts on that?
Polio was on a decrease long before vaccines came in. Polio is managed by hygiene. Polio, for example, caught in swimming pools, they put chlorine into the pool, no more polio. My colleague in the United States was seeing polio victims in the early stages. He was giving them something very simple that's boosted their immunity and killed the virus. He was giving them injections of vitamin C.
Is there anything else you want to say?
Just one thing. Humans need vitamin C because we don't manufacture it. Every other animal and plant manufactures vitamin C from glucose, sugar. The only animals that don't are a species of salmon, the Indian fruit bat, the guinea pig, the human being and the higher apes. So we need external sources of either antioxidants or vitamin C. And when we live in a highly polluted environment, the most polluted environment is probably the environment in the room next door, the kitchen. Outside, it's also polluted. The air is polluted, the water's polluted, and the food is polluted. These are major challenges to every little cell in our body. And the microenvironment of that cell suffers.
What do you say the air's polluted, in what way?
The air is polluted, the gases from the diesel and the motor cars.
Have you heard of chemtrails?
I've heard of chemtrails. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on up there.
And weather manipulation? Heard of that?
I've heard of that too.
Okay. You've done a bit of research, haven't you? Just so you know, I wouldn't allow anybody to convince me of anything until I had enough evidence. So I went on my own journey from about 2010 and I tried to deny what I believed. So it shows you the indoctrination that we go through. Believe me, it's very, very powerful.
Our brainwashing is powerful, but George, we will use the same weapon against them.
Well, I like that idea.
Yeah.
You're on a good mission.
I've been doing it for 50 years. In fact, I was disillusioned with my training in agricultural science because of the chemicals that were being used. That was back in 1963, 64, 65, at a time in the 1960s when there was the flower power and the love-ins and all of that stuff. And the Vietnam War and the opposition to the Vietnam War again, as you know, the massive use of Agent Orange in Vietnam. But it was also the time of Rachel Carson's book, the silent spring, which is all about the death of the planet. And the death of the planet is not occurring. I hope the Greens will listen to this, because they are so stupid. They think carbon dioxide's a pollutant. It's not. The biggest pollutant are the drugs that we're using, the antibiotics, the antidepressants and everything else that's being shoveled into the environment from medicine. And the biggest pollutants, I'm afraid, are the genetic particles that are being injected into us and being breathed out by those who are shedding the rubbish that they're producing from their own metabolic processes. Yeah. So those in Parliament need to wake up to what's happened. Otherwise, they need to go. And I won't mention any names, but some of them are so arrogant and so ignorant, they don't even want to listen, even when we try to communicate with them.
They're not elected, they're selected.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is what we're up against. Yeah. You're up against people who are actually already there to do the bidding.
Well, wasn't Anthony Albanese a communist in his days at university?
From what I understand, you've probably heard of the Fabian Society.
Yes, I have.
I think you'll find the Labor Party politicians and probably quite a few of the Liberal politicians would have been members. Yeah. And that tells you, well, once you actually put people into the key places and you've got the media actually not asking questions that we've been asking, you've got a real serious situation. Because
the journalists have got leaders who are just as corrupt as those in my profession and in politics.
It's a sorry state. But
it's a very sorry state, but we had a fellow by the name of Klaus Schwab who ran the World Economic Forum for so long and trained up some of our young politicians here. I mean, I won't mention any names, but I can mention that strange...
Chief Health Officer?
I didn't say that.
No, I know you didn't say it.
Well, there were a number of chief health officers in this country. Yeah. There's one in particular who I've finished an expert opinion on his behaviour for a court case. Hopefully these things do happen, but we don't know how honest our judicial system is anymore.
They've all got each other's back. Yes. You won't be able to have any logical conversation with these people. That's the problem.
I think we just have to have all the information and the propaganda, and our propaganda will be honest and frightening. But when there's so many people living in the streets and dying from pneumonia and being stabbed in shopping centres, and the police not being able to do anything, that's when something might happen in this country, and it may end up being a military activity. I don't know. I hope not. But if things keep on going the way they are, George, they're not good now. They're far worse than ever. I mean, during the Vietnam War, we had a wonderful life. Back in those days, you only needed to work for a couple of years and you had a deposit for a home. You could buy a home on a quarter-acre block of land. You could buy a car as well, and you could go out and enjoy yourself. Now, people are being encouraged to go and live in a dog box, a 20-storey dog box near the nearest station, so they're only 15 minutes away from everything, and any travel they do, they'll have to pay for the so-called carbon
footprint.
These people just don't realise that the planet's warmed and cooled over tens of thousands of years. And the reason there's more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is because of the warming that's occurring naturally. And the carbon dioxide is coming out of the soil, out of the water systems, because that's where it's trapped and held. Just like a bottle of fizzy water. You heat it up and off comes the carbon dioxide. It's the reverse to what they think.
When I was at school, I was taught that carbon was a good thing and it worked with the environment. The trees sucked in the carbon and produced oxygen.
That's right.
But now it's like, oh, that doesn't apply anymore. I'm thinking, oh, so the science now changed. I'm going, oh, I wonder which way the wind's going to blow tomorrow.
I've got grand ideas for this country. I think Australia is a wonderful place. It's just led by, it's been invaded by idiots. It's been invaded by our enemies, and we haven't been able to recognise them. But the enemy is within us, and it's in Canberra, and the rot is in Canberra. The rot's in Spring Street. The rot is in Macquarie Street. The rot is there, and it has to be excised, or it has to be neutralised. And the only way to do that is for the majority of the population to be awake to what's happening. That's why I'm working with the ACA and some of these other groups. We are not tinfoils, we're not conspiracy theorists. I have to have evidence for everything I say and do.